Welcome to my group therapy session. I'm Andre Goodman, a professional counselor and mental health advocate. This platform is designed to promote a conversation on mental health and wellness and encourage those who are in need of support to seek service. A few days ago, I received a phone call from a father of a prospective client. He's from my hometown, so I think as he was strolling the Psychology Today website, he thought he recognized my name and he was hoping that I was the Andre Goodman that he was thinking of because his son is a student athlete and he thought I'd be a good fit. So we had about a 20-minute long conversation. And the thing that I'm still getting used to is that that conversation is about 19 minutes longer than most of my conversations. But I was encouraged by what he was sharing because it validated why I'm working in this space. He asked if I could connect with his son that day, which I did. I had him reach out to me directly. And I was fully anticipating a conversation centered on performance anxiety because his father had already shared that the kid had mental fog that was getting in the way of his performance, and his college window was starting to shrink, and he wanted to get the best out of it. But before we could even get into the details of the sport, the kid said, Andre, I've been experiencing suicidal ideations for the last few months, which, I immediately perked up because everything in me knew I had to help this kid. And I'm proud to say he's a client right now. And the only reason I'm sharing that story is because having this conversation with you all makes me extremely uncomfortable. But I've learned that my discomfort is secondary to easing the burden of another individual. So that has become my why. In terms of what qualifies me to have the conversation, I was born with less before I was blessed with more than I deserve. I've been able to socialize with the elites, but I've also kept company with those experiencing poverty, and I found comfort somewhere in the middle. Uh, I've been able to relate to the human experience while empathizing with the human condition. And with all the divisive issues in our world today, those two things unite the human race. Regarding my mental fortitude, I competed in one of the toughest leagues in the world against some of the toughest athletes in the world in a sport that I barely knew how to play, and still managed to carve out a 10-year professional career while dragging around a leg that handicapped me and competing with a bone fragment screwed into this left shoulder because I dislocated it 6 different times. So I think I'm qualified to have the conversation, and I'm also passionate about helping other people. I think those closest to me would probably tell you, I'm pretty calm and quiet, whether it be teammates, family, friends, or otherwise. But most of them don't know that the root cause of my mental dysfunction is social anxiety. Um, it limits my ability to be mentally stimulated. Um, the thought of drawing attention to myself shuts me down psychologically. And my social anxiety comes with panic attacks because I operate in a state of panic from being hyper vigilant to non-existent threats from people around me. Um, to properly function, I've had to learn how to relax within that panic, which is the ultimate contradiction. And yet, my profession demanded that I be productive by performing publicly, and I was able to do it. Um, Recently, I connected with a high school friend that I hadn't talked to in about 25 years, and they reminded me that if it was my hope to get other people to face their fear of having this conversation centered around mental health, that I had to do the same. So here I am. Maybe I'm ill is my theme because I'm more connected to what my spirit is telling me than what the world is showing me. And when you're ignoring tangible evidence that doesn't support your belief in the uncertainty, it does feel delusional. So maybe I am. Over the weekend, I participated in a podcast as a guest. It's a mental health podcast locally. I think it's called Speaking with Gravity. It's set to come out February 27th or sometime towards the end of the month. I'll make sure to share it with you all. But the topic of conversation was intrusive thoughts, which for me were those unwanted, selfish, sexual, and devilish thoughts that can be triggered by repressed memories or unprocessed trauma and toxic stress. So I wrote a story relative to the theme and wanted to read it to you all because I read it aloud on air. It's entitled The Shadow Beneath the Tree. it was set to be the prelude to the second novel if I ever get to it. I usually toss these stories to the side because I use them to process my emotions, and once they're processed, they have no more use. But as I'm trying to get used to sharing my life publicly, I figured I'd take a chance with this one. To you all that are unfamiliar with the ideal of the shadow, because they asked about it on the podcast as well. And I think I misspoke about it because I had just got done reading the story aloud and I was surprised that I shared it. But the shadow is one of the archetypes of Carl Jung's analytic psychology. The theory is centered around our physical and spiritual connection with heaven and earth. And that connection is represented by the concept of a tree. I'm sure you all probably already knew this, but I just learned this, that the roots of a tree can grow just as deep below the ground as they do above. And I fell in love with that whole idea because it perfectly summarizes my psychological struggles, just the duality of the two. And I'm also encouraging you all to visit my website as well. If you do, my favorite quote from Carl Jung is on there. It says, "No tree can grow to heaven unless it's rooted down to hell." And I truly believe that becoming one's true self is the overall goal of this particular theory, but it cannot be achieved unless you're willing to integrate all those different parts of yourself, including the shadow, which is that selfish side of you that is often dark and has those selfish desires. The persona is another archetype. It's the multiple personalities that we're willing to show to the world. The enigma is the opposite sex energy for men. It's considered our soft emotional side. The ego is the center of our consciousness and connected to our personal identity, while the self, which is the totality of the psyche, it creates that divine unknown and the inner core to our wisdom. When I started to study the theory, I immediately visualized one of my favorite movies, The Last Dragon, and Bruce Leroy searching for the glow. Well, for me, becoming one true self is the glow. And the irony is that you have to be willing to look beyond yourself and decrease your sense of self and increase your sense of others and become selfless in order to find your purpose in life. Anyway, whether I complete the trilogy or not, the shadow is a big part of the story, and I just wanted to share what I read on air. Maybe I'm ill. At the very least, there's a case that can be made for my mental dysfunction to illogically explain my unique perspective. As a young black kid in the City Heights projects, I often stare out my bedroom window to steal a glimpse of the future that awaits me. The birthplace of my delusion is rooted underneath the tree out front. Absentee fathers are dodging their domestic duties as they're fraternizing with the heads of households, indulging in the happy hour. It's easy to discern the hardworking gentlemen from those who are down on their luck. Hustlers find a lot of business beneath the tree, and when their dealings are done, the homeless convert the space into nightly shelter. As I scan for models of behavior to mimic, the disorderly conduct taints my outlook on life, since figures of greatness are merely a mirage. My trauma runs deep. I sleepwalk with the onslaught of gunfire aimed in my direction. The repressed memories lack any warning, so I'm compelled to operate in a panic mode. Although my apathetic nature appears calm to most, I never stray too far from home, reducing the odds of any dangerous encounters present throughout the neighborhood. With no telephone of our own and no reliable transportation, I've been essentially disconnected from the world and isolated in my own illusions. I've never been properly introduced to reality. And my favorite fantasy, I'm gifted with the supernatural ability to soar beyond my current circumstances. Last night, there was another frantic knock at the door. As I readied myself for the source of the loud pounding, I started to revisit previous incidents. Maybe there's another fight that has broken out downstairs. The party tends to get rowdy when the happy hour spills over into the late evening. However, the loud music has already died down. Perhaps someone is attempting to break in again, and once again, I'll discover the perpetrator in the hallway during my midnight bathroom break. My cousin still hasn't forgiven me for neglecting my bladder that night. But nope, as I suspected, the memory is another paralyzing nightmare. It's the third one this week. I haven't had a good night's sleep since birth. As the morning rises, I'm greeted with my mother's nonchalant explanation that the devil has been taking rides on my back in the middle of my lucid dreams. I've developed a healthy habit of never asking her to elaborate, Instead, I feigned disinterest to avoid increasing the burden she already bears. But what does the devil want with me, and why is he hijacking my sleep? As the demonic deliberations clamor for my attention, I'm veering in and out of the present tense. I'm definitely not well. I'm desperate for guidance, but I have nowhere to turn. The important male figures in my life have their own struggles. So I focused my energy on becoming the role model I needed in that moment. But my neurotic personality demands perfection. Maybe I'm ill. Again, thank you all for listening. I hope you attend the next session. Giddy out.